Wake of the Bellerephon by T.B. Dahl. Chapter 8. Midshipman. Thomas Oxenham followed Midshipman Kempo into the interior of HMS Bellerephon and discovered at once that a ship of the line was not built to be understood by newcomers. It was built to fight. Understanding was optional and came later, usually after one had struck one's head, lost one's way, or been shouted at by a man with missing teeth and perfect knowledge of rope. The passages ran into ladders, the ladders dropped into decks, the decks opened into dim spaces filled with guns, beams, shadows, hanging gear, coils of line, buckets, casks, men, boys, orders, smells, and the sort of purposeful confusion that suggested madness had been organized by the Admiralty and issued in triplicate. Thomas carried his chest as long as pride could lift it. Pride, he soon learned, had poor muscles. The oak chest bumped his knees, scraped a hatch combing, and tried twice to remove his fingers. William's joinery held magnificently, Thomas's arms less so. Kemp glanced over his shoulder. Mind the gratings here, slippery when wet. Thomas adjusted his grip and followed. The air thickened as they descended. Above there had been harbour wind and daylight. Below, the ship breathed differently. Tar, salt, damp wood, hemp, unwashed bodies, old grease, lantern smoke, bilge, gunpowder hidden somewhere beyond bulkheads and regulations. Thomas tried breathing through his mouth and found that the flavour was not an improvement. Kempe saw his face. First time on a ship of the line? First time on any ship larger than a fishing boat. Kemp nodded with professional pity. You will get used to it. Thomas looked around. To the smell? The smell, the noise, the dark, the rats, the motion, though she is quiet now. At anchor, Bellerephon is almost domestic. At that exact moment, a pump clanked somewhere below with the steady misery of a condemned bell. A man shouted above. Another shouted back, angrier and less grammatical. Blocks rattled. A bosun's pipe shrilled. The ship's timbers groaned as she shifted against her moorings, vast oak complaining in its sleep. A bucket toppled nearby, rolled across the deck, struck a sailor's boot, and was cursed as if it had made a personal decision. Kemp said, almost. They emerged onto the gun deck. Thomas stopped despite himself. Long rows of cannon stretched into dimness, lashed and secured, their black iron bodies massive, silent, and unpleasantly patient. Tackle hung from ring bolts. Handspikes lay ready. Shot stood in garlands, sponges, rammers, worms, ladles, buckets, slow match, quoins, breaching ropes. All the apparatus of ordered destruction sat where it belonged. Men moved around the guns with the ease of people who had accepted living beside monsters. Kemp followed his gaze. 32-pounders on this deck. Thomas swallowed. Each one? Each one. Over 3 tons apiece. In action, every gun is its own little kingdom. Gun captain, loader, sponger, rammer, train tackle men, powder boy, all moving together. You will learn the drill soon enough. Thomas stepped closer to one of the guns. The muzzle was wide enough to receive both his fists. Do midshipmen serve at the guns? Kempe nodded. We command gun crews, carry orders, assist where needed, and try not to be killed by our own stupidity before the enemy has a turn. He patted the breaching rope. Remember this. A gun in recoil is not a cannon. It is a large iron animal returning to its maker with complaints. Never stand behind it. Thomas nodded. The gun deck seemed suddenly less like an arrangement and more like a treaty between men and violence. Kemp continued aft and upward again. Quarterdeck first. Mr. Ballard will be waiting. They climbed into light. The sudden brightness struck Thomas's eyes, and he blinked hard until the world remade itself. He stood on the quarterdeck. This was not merely another deck. Even Thomas felt it before Kemp said a word. The air had rank in it. Men walked differently here. Voices did not stop, but they narrowed. The helm, binnacle, mizzenmast, signal halyards, rail, skylights, the view forward over the waist and guns and men, all belonged to command. A tall lieutenant stood by the rail speaking with the sailing master. The lieutenant turned as they approached. His face was weather-browned, lean, and marked by years of wind. His eyes were sharp blue. His hair was tied back in regulation fashion, though grey showed at the temples. His coat was worn but exact. He looked like a man who could detect slackness in a topsail brace by smell. Kemp halted. "Mr. Ballard, our new young gentleman, Thomas Oxenham, son of Captain Oxenham." The lieutenant studied Thomas. Thomas stood straight, though his arms ached, and his chest sat at his feet like a small oak accusation. "I am Lieutenant Ballard," the officer said. "Third of this ship. Captain Hope has assigned me as your sea daddy." Thomas had heard the word from James, though never spoken quite so publicly. Sea daddy. It sounded absurd until one considered the alternatives. The Navy took boys from their families, threw them into floating batteries, and then assigned them replacement fathers who swore more and possessed less patience. Bureaucracy is often sentimental by accident. "Thank you, sir," Thomas said. "I am eager to learn." Ballard's mouth moved slightly. Eager. The word received inspection and was not entirely approved. "We shall examine that condition after a week of watches, sail drill, and being wrong in public." "Yes, sir." Ballard turned to a nearby marine. "Corporal, take Mr. Oxenham's chest to the midshipman's berth and see it stowed." The marine stepped forward. "Aye, sir." Thomas bent for the chest by instinct. Ballard said, "Leave it." Thomas stopped. "You will report back to me in 1 hour, Mr. Oxenham," Ballard continued. "Your education begins immediately. Captain Hope expects his young gentlemen to be useful members of the ship's company." "Yes, sir." "And Mr. Oxenham?" "Yes, sir." Eagerness is acceptable. Display is not. Thomas felt heat rise in his face. "Yes, sir." The marine lifted the chest with practiced ease, which was humiliating but also restful. "This way, sir," the marine said. They descended again, past the guns, past men scrubbing decks and coiling lines, past a berth deck where hammocks would be slung at night in ranks so close that sailors slept like thoughts packed into a single skull. Down to the orlop, the lowest habitable level of the ship crouched above the hold like a secret. The light was dim, the air was stale, lantern flames moved behind horn panes. The beams hung low, though Thomas was not yet tall enough to be threatened by them. He ducked anyway, because every boy aboard a new ship ducks, when told, even if only his dignity is in danger. The marine stopped at a canvas partition. "Midshipman's berth, sir. Home sweet home, as they say." Thomas stepped through. The phrase "home sweet home" immediately resigned its commission. The berth was not a room as Greystone House understood rooms. It was a partitioned section of the orlop deck, lit by oil lamps that contributed more smoke than clarity. A long table occupied the middle. Sea chests lined the sides. Hammocks were rolled or hanging according to use, rank, and indifference. Pegs held coats, hats, stockings, one cracked lantern, a telescope with a dented tube, 2 onion strings, and a pistol belt no one had buckled properly. The air smelled of damp wool, ink, tobacco, boot leather, stale cheese, unwashed linen, candle grease, and bilge water plotting below. Somewhere nearby, rats scurried. At least a dozen young gentlemen occupied the space. Young gentlemen, Thomas observed, came in several states of repair. Some were boys not much older than he was. Some were young men in their 20s who had not yet passed, failed, survived, or been noticed sufficiently to rise. 2 played cards. 1 wrote a letter with theatrical suffering. A pair bent over a chart and argued about longitude, as if longitude had insulted them. Another lay in a hammock, one arm hanging down, asleep or pretending to be dead. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned. Thomas stood very still. "Fresh meat," someone said. Not loudly, loud enough. A tall, thin midshipman detached himself from the card table. He was perhaps 19, with a long face, narrow shoulders, and a sardonic expression that seemed not so much worn as inherited. "You must be Oxenham." "Yes." "I am Charles Milford, senior midshipman of this mess." Thomas straightened a fraction. "Mr. Milford." Milford's eyes dropped to Thomas's clothes. "No uniform yet." "It is being made." "Comforting. The fleet depends upon tailors more than Parliament admits." A few boys snorted. Thomas said nothing. Milford paced once around him, a poor imitation of Captain Hope, and therefore more irritating. "If your uniform does not arrive before we sail, you will be the laughingstock of the fleet." The Marine sat down the chest. "Where shall I put this, Mr. Milford?" Milford pointed to a narrow space along the bulkhead. "There. It will serve as his seat too." The chest slid into place. Milford looked back at Thomas. "That is your territory, 6 feet by 2. Generous by Bellerephon standards. Sling your hammock above it at night. Stow it by day. Spill nothing. Touch no one's private stores. Borrow nothing unless you enjoy being hated accurately." Thomas nodded. The space looked hardly larger than a coffin. A coffin, however, rarely had roommates. The Marine touched his forehead and withdrew, leaving Thomas among his new countrymen. A stocky youth of about 16 came forward from near the table. His round face carried more kindness than the berth seemed designed to permit. "John Farley," he said, "do not mind Milford. He treats all new boys as if they were a disease he once survived." Milford, already turning back to the cards, said, "Farley confuses cruelty with public service." Farley grinned and crouched by the chest. "You will want to lash it properly." Thomas knelt beside him. Farley showed him the deck ring, the short line, the way to pass and secure the chest so it would not slide in a seaway. "You do not want that thing breaking loose in a blow," Farley said. "A sea chest becomes artillery below decks if not restrained." Thomas tightened the line. "Like a gun in recoil?" Farley glanced at him. "Exactly." "You have been taught something, then?" "My father taught me what he could." "Captain Oxenham, yes?" Thomas nodded. A voice from the card table said, "Stories from fathers do not help when you are puking bile in a gale or when the frogs send a 32-pound ball through the hull." Farley leaned closer. "That is Edmund Villiers. Ignore him when he has been losing at cards." "I heard that," Villiers said. "You were meant to." Villiers was long-limbed, dark-haired, and pale under the eyes, with the expression of a youth who had mistaken bitterness for depth and been rewarded socially for it. Thomas turned the lashing once more. Farley nodded approval. "You will also need to rig your hammock. I will show you tonight. Too loose, and you sag like old laundry. Too tight, and the first roll drops you like a sack of flour. Nothing delights the old hands more than a new midshipman falling out at midnight." "Thank you," Thomas said. Farley's kindness was so ordinary that Thomas felt a sudden dangerous gratitude. Milford looked up from his cards. "Mr. Ballard does not tolerate tardiness, Oxenham, nor does Mr. Knox, and Mr. Knox is the one who will decide whether you possess a brain or merely a gentleman's skull." "Who is Mr. Knox?" "The master's mate," Farley said. "Navigation, seamanship, practical work. He teaches new whelps which end of the ship is forward." "I have studied navigation," Thomas said, before he could stop himself. "My father taught me to use an octant and work latitude." The berth went quiet in a different way. Villiers laughed. "Naturally. And I am Lord Howe in disguise." Thomas kept his mouth closed. He felt the old schoolroom lesson rise in him. Do not answer every hook. Some men fish with insults because they are poor at conversation. Before Milford could add anything, a deeper voice spoke from the entrance, making the new arrival feel welcome, are we, gentlemen? Every midshipman straightened. A stocky, middle-aged man stepped through the partition. He wore the plain authority of a warrant officer, with broad shoulders, weathered skin, and a silver caul hanging at his neck. His eyes moved over the berth once and found every offence without appearing to search. Milford inclined his head. "Mr. Flint, we are showing Mr. Oxenham the ropes. I am certain you were showing him something." The boatswain's voice was dry enough to cure fish. His gaze landed on Thomas. "Mr. Ballard sent me to fetch you. Says he wishes to begin your education before the berth finishes ruining you." Thomas stood. "Yes. Sigh." He caught himself. "Yes, Mr. Flint." A crease appeared at the edge of Flint's mouth. "Quick learner, useful habit. Come along." Thomas followed him out of the berth, feeling the stairs at his back. The dim passage seemed almost restful after the berth. Mr. Flint walked with a rolling ease, one hand occasionally touching a beam or stanchion without looking, as though the ship and his body had made private arrangements long before. "Do not let them trouble you," Flint said. Thomas looked up. "Every midshipman goes through it. They nip and bark to see what sound you make. Some grow out of it, some become lieutenants." Thomas nearly smiled. Flint continued, "The berth sorts men. Not kindly, but sorting rarely is." "Were you a midshipman, Mr. Flint?" "No." The answer came without embarrassment. "I came through the hawse hole. Before the mast first. Able seaman. Captain of the foretop. Boatswain's mate. Now warrant. Different ladder from yours." They reached a companionway. Flint paused. "Your father is Captain James Oxenham?" "Yes." "Served in Juneau?" "Yes." "Toulon?" Thomas lifted his chin a little. "Yes." "I heard of him." "Good officer. Kept his head when others misplaced theirs." "That is a rarer skill than courage." Thomas felt pride swell in his chest. Flint saw it and let it stand for exactly one breath. "His name may open a door. It will not climb the rigging for you." "No, Mr. Flint." "Good." They climbed. The ship's noises changed with each deck. Muffled darkness, gun deck thunder, deck light chatter, wind above. Thomas began building a map in his head. Companion ladder aft, gun deck, hatchway, orlop below, berth by canvas partition, captain's cabin aft, quarter deck above. Nothing was orderly yet, but not everything was lost. Lieutenant Ballard waited on the gun deck beside one of the 32-pounders. He was examining the gun with a critical eye, one hand resting on the carriage, the other on the breeching rope. "Thank you, Mr. Flint." Flint touched his forehead. "Mind him, sir. He has the look of one who thinks." Ballard glanced at Thomas. Dangerous, if unsupervised. Flint departed. Ballard faced Thomas. "Well, Mr. Oxenham, what do you think of your new home?" Thomas hesitated. Ballard's eyes narrowed. "The truth? I have no use for flattery. False enthusiasm is for recruitment posters and very young ensigns." Thomas drew a breath. "The berth is smaller than I expected, sir, and darker." Ballard nodded. "And the mess? They are testing me." "That is a polite way to put it. Especially Mr. Milford." Ballard looked briefly amused. "Milford tests because he fears being found ordinary. Villiers sneers because disappointment is easier than effort. Farley is decent. Do not mistake decency for weakness. He is the best topman among them. Remember that?" "Yes, sir." "The midshipman's berth is a world unto itself. It has customs, cruelties, loyalties, and laws no one wrote down, because that would make them less foolish. I will guide where I can. Much you must learn yourself." Ballard tapped the gun beside them. "Now, begin with something simpler. What do you know of a 32-pounder? Thomas looked at the cannon. "It fires a 32-pound shot, sir." "An inspired opening. Continue." Thomas flushed. "Lower gun deck battery, heavy long gun. Range and penetration superior to smaller pieces, but slower to work. Requires a full crew. Breaching rope controls recoil. Train tackles haul her out again after firing. Elevation adjusted by quoin." Ballard's expression did not change, but his voice altered by 1 degree. "Better. Name the principal tools." "Sponge, rammer, worm, ladle, though cartridges reduce use. Handspikes, pricker." Priming horn, slow match, powder bucket. Good. For the next hour, Ballard drilled him in naval gunnery, not the heroic version, the working version. Run out, level, prime, fire, sponger in, load cartridge, shot, wad, ram home, prick cartridge, prime, stand clear, fire, secure. He explained why a wet sponge could save a crew from premature ignition, why powder boys carried cartridges in covered cases, why a gun captain watched not only the enemy but his own men's hands, why a loose, breaching rope could kill more efficiently than French courage. Thomas repeated the sequence until Ballard stopped him. "You have a good memory." Thomas held back a smile. "That will serve you. It will not save you by itself. In action, memory must survive noise, smoke, screams, heat, blood, splinters, officers shouting contradictory things, and the gun beside you firing when you are not ready. That is why drill exists. Drill is memory hammered into the body." Thomas looked at the 32-pounder. The gun sat silent, but he could almost hear it now. The roar, the recoil, the tackles screaming, men heaving, powder smoke thick as night. Ballard turned. "Come." "Something else?" They climbed to the main deck. Late afternoon sun slanted across the planking. Sailors coiled ropes, checked blocks, tarred standing rigging, shifted stores, and cursed small tasks with the intimate affection of men who knew they would be given larger ones. Marines drilled in a square, redcoats bright, muskets moving with mechanical snap. Above, the masts soared. Ballard said, "Look up." Thomas looked. The three masts rose like a forest trained for war. Foremast, mainmast, mizzen. Yards crossed them, furled canvas bundled along the spars. Shrouds climbed in black lines. Ratlines stitched them horizontally. Stays sloped forward. Braces ran aft and down. Halyards, lifts, clew lines, bunt lines, leech lines, sheets, tacks. An entire language hung above him. Thomas felt his neck go back farther and farther. It seemed impossible that men could understand all of it. It seemed more impossible that they could do so in rain, night, battle, or a gale. "Intimidating," Ballard said. "Yes, sir." "Good. A man not intimidated by rigging has not understood gravity." A sailor nearby grinned and went on coiling line. Ballard pointed upward. "Every line has a purpose. Every spar has a function. Nothing is decorative except, regrettably, some young gentleman." Thomas kept his eyes up. "By the time we reach Spithead, I expect you to name every sail, every principal line, and every part of the ship's standing and running rigging." Thomas swallowed. "Yes, sir. Do not look as if I have ordered you to eat the mainmast. We begin with what you know. That? Mainmast, sir. Forward? Foremast. Aft? Mizzen. The yards on the main, from lowest upward. Main yard. Topsail yard. Topgallant yard. Royal yard. Good. Sails? Main course. Main topsail. Main topgallant sail. Main royal," Ballard nodded. "Now find the main topsail sheets." Thomas hesitated. His eyes travelled. Too many lines, too many angles. He chose. Ballard said no. Thomas tried again. No. A third time. Ballard's finger moved. "There. Follow the lead. Do not guess by where you think a line ought to be. Look where it goes." Thomas traced the line with his eyes. The ship's logic shifted a fraction. "Again," Ballard said. They spent another hour under the masts. Ballard pointed, Thomas named. Thomas pointed. Ballard corrected. Sometimes Ballard demanded purpose, sometimes direction. Sometimes, what would happen if that line parted? The answer was often unpleasant. If the brace parted, the yard might swing. If the halyard went, the sail might drop. If the lift failed, the yard could dip. If the sheet was mishandled, canvas flogged, men swore, officers noticed, and the ship lost way at the worst possible moment. Seamanship was the art of preventing rope from becoming prophecy. By sunset, Thomas's neck ached, his shoulder throbbed, and his mind was full enough to leak. Ballard finally lowered his hand. "Enough." Thomas almost sagged, caught himself, and did not. Ballard noticed. "Good start, Mr. Oxenham." The words were spare. They warmed him more than praise would have. "Report to me at the beginning of the morning watch tomorrow. 4 bells." Thomas calculated. 6 o'clock, sir. "Precisely." Ballard turned away, then stopped. "Find your berth. Eat. Rig your hammock. Sleep if the berth allows civilization. We sail with the morning tide." Thomas saluted, then hesitated. "Sir?" Ballard looked back. "May I ask a question?" "If it is not whether you may go home." Thomas shook his head. "What does Sea Daddy mean exactly?" Ballard's stern face softened by the narrowest measurable amount. "It means I am responsible for your professional making. I will teach you seamanship, navigation, conduct, command, and survival. I will correct your mistakes. I will acknowledge your progress when progress becomes visible without magnification. Yes, sir. It does not mean I will coddle you. It does not mean excuses. The sea is an unforgiving mistress, and the Navy envies her severity." Thomas nodded. "I understand." "You do not," Ballard said. "But you will." He studied Thomas another moment. "Every officer aboard this ship began where you stand now. The berth separates those merely born to privilege from those fit to command. Remember that when they mock you. Also remember it when you attempted to mock someone else." Thomas absorbed that. "Yes, sir." "Off with you." Thomas found his way back with fewer errors than expected. He turned once too early and discovered the marine mess. He corrected himself before anyone decided this was entertainment. The ship had begun to arrange itself in his mind by smells and sounds, as much as by ladders, gun deck, iron, oil, men, pale planking, orlop, damp, lamps, bilge, berth, cheese, ink, resentment. When Thomas reached the midshipman's berth, supper had begun. The table held salt beef, peas pudding, hard bread, and an atmosphere of criticism. Farley waved him over. "There you are. We saved you a portion." Milford looked up. "Do not let kindness mislead you. It was the least stringy piece, because no one identified it in time." Thomas sat on his sea chest as instructed. The chest did not rock. William's work held. Farley passed him bread. "Eat while the bread is fresh. It will not remain so. Bread at sea is a creature with a short moral life." Thomas took it gratefully. He had not realized how hungry he was until the first bite. The beef was salty enough to preserve his tongue for winter. The peas pudding held its shape in a way that suggested either strong character or danger. He ate all of it. Villiers watched him. "Not too fine for ship's food, then." Thomas looked up. "Hungry men are poor aristocrats." Farley choked on his drink. Clark laughed outright. Milford studied Thomas with renewed interest. Villiers looked annoyed, which Thomas counted as a modest victory. After supper, Farley helped him rig his hammock. The hammock was a narrow strip of canvas slung between beams, innocent in appearance and treacherous in practice. "Not too slack," Farley said. "You will fold around yourself and wake unable to feel your legs." He tightened the lashing. "Not too tight. You will roll out when she lifts. She is at anchor. Tonight, yes. Tomorrow she will introduce herself." Thomas climbed in once, rolled half out, caught the side, and heard snickering from the table. Farley said, "Again?" Thomas tried again. Better. Morris, the round-faced boy, offered advice while eating something from a paper twist. "Sleep diagonal?" Clark said, "Ignore Morris. He fell out twice his first week." "3 times, Morris said, "but once was sabotage." Milford, writing in a small notebook, did not look up. "Gravity needs little assistance with Morris." The berth settled by stages. Some midshipmen went on watch. Others wrote, muttered, sorted gear, patched clothes, checked pistols, argued over cards, or crawled into hammocks with the exhausted indifference of boys who knew sleep was a ration and not a right. Thomas unlocked his chest once before lying down. He touched the logbook, the compass, Eliza's pouch, the oiled wool, his spare linen. Then he locked it again. The secret drawer remained empty for now. Its emptiness felt like a promise. Later, Thomas lay in his hammock listening. The ship did not sleep. It creaked, tapped, groaned, sighed, shifted, whispered in rope and timber. Men snored. Someone coughed. Someone cursed in a dream. A rat crossed somewhere below with official confidence. Water slapped the hull. The harbour moved around them, dark and breathing. Home arrived suddenly, not as a thought, as a smell that was not there. Wood smoke from Greystone House, lavender in linen, apple store, Anne's bread, Eliza's hair, the forge smoke on William's coat, the pond in summer. Thomas closed his eyes more tightly. He would not cry in the berth. That was not courage. It was only common sense. The hammock swayed gently. Above him, Bellerephon's guns slept in their ports. Her masts stood black against the harbour sky, her anchors held for one more night. With morning tide, she would move. Thomas Oxenham, newest midshipman aboard His Majesty's 74-gun ship Bellerephon, listened to the creaking world around him and understood that his first day had not made him a sailor. It had merely removed the shore. Sleep came at last, thin and broken, and below that sleep, like a drum heard through walls, the tide turned.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.